Christmas. Last year some of you asked if I could do a tutorial of my tree because I did a time lapse of it last year. So for those of you that are interested, I'm going to show you how to achieve my beautiful tree, well, when it's dressed. So here's a picture of my tree complete. The one on the left is in the day with the lights on, and the one on the right is in the evening with the lights on. So I won't go through all the process of how to put your tree together, it's pretty simple, but it's more about the plumping that's the important part for me. That's the foundation of a really good tree. I wanted one that was really bushy, and I got mine from Tesco. This is a Canadian spruce green tree. So when you get it out of the box, it's always got holes in it and the branches need plumping. When you've plumped it, it looks like this and it's a lot fuller. So each branch tends to have about 8 to 10 individual branches and they vary in thickness, and you want to splay these out as wide as you can get them. If you lift the branches up towards the back, then you're going to fill in all those little gaps and the tree will become less see-through. The bushier the better. And here you can see the comparison between the before and after. Once I've finished splaying out all of my branches, the next step for me is to put in this semi-see-through fabric. I've chosen red because my theme is red and gold. I like to keep it quite traditional, and it does have glitter on it, so it will go everywhere and you will need to hoover your floor. But I apply these all the way around the tree, starting at the very top, and as they come down they get wider apart, and this just helps to add a really beautiful red glow to your tree. When the lights shine through it and you're in the flesh, you can really notice it. It's a beautiful addition to the tree. We've always sort of applied tinsel around the tree in a horizontal way, so applying these vertically just makes your tree look a lot more modern. Push these right between the branches so they sink into the tree. You want it visible, but you want it far back enough that it's not going to prevent your lights from sitting inside the tree. Now my preference are warm lights. A lot of people like cool lights nowadays, but warm just gives it a really beautiful feel to the living room. It makes it feel cozy and warm. And rather than your traditional bulbs, I've opted for berry lights because the casing is slightly bigger and it's a frosted finish which diffuses the light and creates a softer glow to the tree. I always find the very centre of my lights rather than starting at one end, and I decorate from the top downwards. So with the right side of the lights I decorate the right side, and with the left side I decorate the left side. Make sure you press the wiring into the tree so you can't see it hanging out, and try and get it as even as possible. So always keep stepping back and just making sure that it looks nice and even. Something that I always apply to my tree are beads. It's something that my mum always used to do and I really like it. So I take cream and gold and I lock them together. And a bit like if you were icing a cake, I go around the tree and drape the beads in tiers. I always try to make sure that either the gold or the cream hangs slightly lower. It won't be perfect because the branches never sit in the ideal place. I just try my best to make sure they're as symmetrical as possible so that when I stand back it doesn't look odd, and the tiers do tend to get a little bit wider as we go down the tree. Once you get all the other decorations on, they're not going to be as noticeable if they're not perfect, so don't worry too much. So it should look something like this. Next up I take these gold springs, and you only need about 5 of them if you're only decorating the front of your tree, which I'm doing. I shall be keeping my blinds closed. So I pop one end of the spring in the very top of the tree and wedge it between the branches. Then I allow the spiral to drop and I just manipulate each of the spirals into the tree as it hangs vertically. So although the spring goes relatively straight as you drop it down, it does curl really easy, so just pull it upwards and it will just form the spiral for you, and then you can just wedge that in between the branches. These have a really chunky glitter finish to them, so they do tend to drop a lot on the floor to begin with, but I've had these about 3 years now and they are still going strong. And then at the bottom of them I just tuck them underneath the branches because they are a little bit longer than my tree. I've got a 7-foot tree, but these would easily fit the length of an 8-foot tree. So you just want to space them out next to each other and go around the entire circumference of your Christmas tree. For decoration, I like to take the biggest items first. So these are my big berries and these stick out of the tree. I've seen this done with candy canes, feather plumes, there's all sorts that you can get. I like the berries because again they're quite traditional. I have around 10 of these, but you would need a fair few more if you're going to decorate the entire circumference of the tree, but for me I'm only decorating the front half that you can see, and I like to make them kind of as even as possible. So roughly put them in place, step back and then just tweak them where you need to. So I have a large red adornment, now I'm going to go in with a gold one. The red ones aren't glittery, they've got a kind of gloss shiny finish to them, so these ones are glittery. Believe it or not, I'm not a massive fan of glitter, but they beam off of the light so beautifully. It's a must for a Christmas tree. And I like to place these in and around the red ones, again so they're nice and even, because these are the biggest items on the tree, so they need to look evenly spaced, and you need gaps between these to fit in your smaller items. Next I go in with my biggest baubles, and again starting with the biggest items going down to the smallest, because then that way you can just fill in all the little spaces with the smaller items you've got. You want to make sure the biggest items are placed evenly first. I wanted to break up the red and gold with a different colour, so I opted for a white shade, and these baubles have gold embellishment on them so they still match the tree. And I only have 6 of these, so again they needed to be evenly placed throughout the tree so they're not close to one another. And you also want to make sure that you're spacing your red and gold in between each other, so you don't have too much white in one area, too much gold, or too much red. So these red ones are the same size as the white ones. I wanted them to be the same size, just different colours. And then I have 2 sets of smaller baubles in white and red as well. But these are a different finish to the other baubles. These have a satin finish, so it adds a kind of different texture, and they're also plain, which makes them completely different to these slightly smaller baubles, which are a mix of glitter and mirror finish in 2 shades of red and 2 shades of gold. And I'm evenly distributing these between all of the baubles that I've already placed on the tree. I then bought some even smaller baubles and just placed this between all of the baubles. All of those decorations that I've already placed on are from my previous years of decorating my tree. This year I purchased these red glittery flowers, and I only bought 6 of them because they're around £2 each, so you think £12 for one set of decorations, it all works out quite expensive. So it's quite ideal if you buy decorations to do it over the years and just build up your tree until you're happy with how much you've got. The next set of tree ornaments I've got are kind of individual ones. I didn't want any of these ones to match, so they're only ones that don't have a partner. I kind of feel like these give the tree a little bit of personality. They're the kind of more standout items. And I got these all in gold, and they all have a really nice sort of glitzy finish to them. Much like before, I evenly spaced them throughout the tree so that they can be seen but they're not all close to one another. It makes the tree look a little less boring if everything isn't so samey. I picked up these jingle bells. I know they're similar to baubles, but because they are more of a metal finish, they don't look the same as the baubles, and they've got a really pretty pattern with little stars cut into them. So I just find all the little spaces that need filling and put the jingle bells between them. These are the little balls that I was telling you about. I use them as fillers to fill in any tiny little gaps. Then lastly, I made a batch of ribbons. Some are tartan with a red glitter to them, and another set are cream and gold. And then I just sort of press them into the tree. You don't even need to secure them in place because they kind of just sit between all the decorations. I always hate looking at my tree without the lights on because it just looks a little bit naff because all the golds don't kind of match, but as soon as the lights come on, it's the most beautiful tree. It really is. It looks so pretty in the flesh as well. What's great about these like ribbons is that they're slightly see-through in the material, so when the lights shine through them, they create a really beautiful glow. I tend to put on more of the cream ones than the tartan ones, but that's just my preference, and you can make these pretty much out of anything. You can do it from organza, which you can buy really cheap on eBay, or you can get the rolls of ribbon from the garden centre, and they're so simple to make. So I'm going to turn my studio lighting off and pop on the actual Christmas lights so you can see the full effect. As you can see, it's a really beautiful warm gold shade. The berry lights give a really nice diffused finish. It's not an uncomfortable light to stare at, and the overall finish is really pretty. I really love doing that traditional gold and red colour, but there's so many options. My sister has kind of like a cool coloured tree and it's all silver and blue. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I hope it gave you some inspiration for your own tree. Merry Christmas, and I will see you in my next tutorial. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!